of the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Berkeley. My name is Ken Marino. I am your ministerial intern. I am standing in today for Reverend Michelle, who has been sick for the last few days. Nothing COVID related, so please keep her in your prayers. From beyond the playful summer clouds, beyond the earth's thin blue line, from beyond the bright moon and meteor showers, we hear the call to look and listen carefully, to turn away from the world that buys and sells happiness, to fully experience the luring whisper of our heart's truth. Why not today? Why not now? We are here and together at home in this evolving place, home in this ever-changing breath and body, home in this dewy morning, even as it reaches towards a hot high noon. We hear the call far beyond and deep within, and we do not hear it alone. Come, let us worship together.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Berkeley. My name is Bob Adams, and I am worship associate today. This is a welcoming congregation, and we are always working on how to welcome and care for one another better. If this is your first time here, we're glad you came. And whoever you are, we welcome you in the fullness of who you are. As we begin, we want to acknowledge that this church occupies the land of Hu Chin, the unceded territory of the Chochenyo-speaking Ohlone people. We understand that we continue to benefit from the seizure and occupation of this land. We acknowledge and embrace our responsibility to take restorative action. We affirm that this is deeply felt and commit our congregation to being in right relationship with the indigenous communities around us, aligning in solidarity, supporting their projects, and caring properly for the land. Please take a moment to prepare yourself and your space for our time together. You might get a candle and a way to light it so you can join in the chalice lighting at home. Now, let us kindle our flames with these words by Bear W. Halezkua. As we light the chalice, may our souls become its hearth. We join our hearts to the one great flame of bright compassion, beloved community, and fervent justice. May we become lanterns to the world, lighting the way for all. Now, please join with me in singing our first hymn, We Gathered Together in Joyful Thanksgiving. The words will be on the screen. Today we have 4 candles of resilience to light. We also pause to remind ourselves of some of the foundations of resilience. We light a candle of courage, a candle of acts of service, a candle of fellowship, and a candle of hope. May we find and cultivate these in ourselves and in one another. So please join me now in saying our covenant. Love guides this church. The quest for truth and justice is its common purpose. To give thanks, listen deeply, speak with care, honor our differences, and seek and grant forgiveness. These things we covenant with one another.
I've a song, a beautiful routine. I hope you like it. My technique can't be wrong. I learned it from the screen. I hope you like it. I studied all the songs that all the lovers sing, and just for you I wrote this little thing. Blah, 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 moon, blah, 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 pop, blah, 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 croon, blah, 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 love. Tra-la-la-la, tra-la-la-la-la, merry month of May. Tra-la-la-la, tra-la-la-la-la, 'neath the crowds of gray. Blah, 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 your hair, blah, 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 your eyes, blah, 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 care, blah, 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 skies. Tra-la-la-la, tra-la-la-la-la, cottage for two. Blah, 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 darling, with you.
This year marks the 400th anniversary of the first Puritan harvest in Patuxent Shore at what is now Massachusetts Bay. It also marks the first sermon preached in New England 400 years ago. This week we will celebrate with turkey, corn stuffing, yams, string beans with almonds, pumpkin pie with whipped cream. Makes me wonder what they actually ate at this first harvest festival. Well, they probably didn't have turkey, but they did eat corn, and probably not the corn on the cob that we eat, but cornmeal. They may have had deer, but it would have been the Wampanoags who brought the deer, because in England, as in much of Europe at the time, hunting was forbidden and reserved solely for the nobility. The story of corn is enwrapped in Native American history, as our lives are enwrapped in Native American history. In Native American culture, for thousands of years, corn has been one of the three sisters: corn, beans, and squash. Native Americans call it maize, meaning that which sustains. And it was the cultivating of corn that changed the nomadic societies to more sedentary agricultural societies. The Wampanoag, meaning people of the first light, were the nation people that greeted the Puritans after their long winter that they had suffered on these foreign shores. The Wampanoag had been dealing with Europeans for over 100 years, and it was Italian explorer Giovanni da Verrazzano who was the first documented European to make contact with the Narragansetts and the Wampanoag in southern New England. In 1524, while sailing for the French, he traveled up Narragansett Bay and traded with the native people he found there. On March 9th of 1621, the Wampanoag sachem Somerset, who knew a little English from trading with fishermen, greeted the pilgrims with the words, "Welcome, Englishmen." To their surprise, he told them about Tisquantum, who would later be known as Squanto, a member of the Patuxet tribe. He told them that Squanto knew English because he had been swept away across the waters. In 1614, John Smith had landed in Patuxet, now Massachusetts Bay, and he left on another ship, leaving in charge Captain Thomas Hunt, who invited 26 Pawtucket on board in lieu of trading their furs for metal tools. He deceived them and he kidnapped them with the idea that he would take them to Malaga, Spain, and sell them as slaves, along with his fish. Spanish friars uncovered his plan and used a law that forbid the enslavement of the Native Americans to free some of the captives, including Squanto. And he lived with the friars who taught him about their faith until he was able to smuggle himself aboard a ship to London and then to Newfoundland. In 1618, Captain Thomas Dernier hired him as a translator for a voyage to New England. And when he returned to New England, he found that his tribe had died from an epidemic, probably smallpox, and he was the sole remaining Pawtuxet. Now, Squanto was an invaluable asset to the Pilgrim separatists. He taught them how to live off the land, how to cultivate corn, extract sap from the maple trees, and where to fish. He showed them which plants were poisonous and should be avoided, and which could be eaten or used as medicine. He also taught them how to hunt, which of course they would have never done in Europe. He also showed them how to hoe with clamshells. The Pilgrims had so much abundance after their first harvest, thanks to Squanto, that the first sermon preached in 1621, actually on December 9th, was when Thomas Cushman preached about the pitfalls of self-love and the pitfalls of overindulgence. Squanto helped forge an alliance as well between the Pilgrims and the local tribes that stayed for 50 years. Another legacy of Squanto was teaching the planting of corn. Corn, again, is a sacred grain, one of the three sisters' crops: corn, squash, and beans. And it's celebrated in myths and legends like the Iroquois Onata story of the corn. The three vegetables benefit each other while they are growing. The tall corn plants create a living trellis for the beans to climb up. The large leaves of the squash vines shade the soil, helping to keep moisture in and shade out the sun for emerging weeds. Beans fix nitrogen in the ground so the corn will continue to grow from years to come. The prickly stems and leaves of squash vines help to keep raccoons and other predators from the foods. And as we know, corn and beans are combined in many vegetarian dishes as a complete protein. In Native American cultures, children learn about the sacred relationship with the land through stories like Onata. In this story, the Iroquois grandmother tells of a prehistoric time when it was not needful to plant the corn seed, nor to hold the fields, for the corn sprang up of itself and filled the broad meadows. Its stalks grew strong and tall and were covered with leaves like waving banners. They were filled with ears of pearly grain wrapped in silken green husks. In those days, Onata, the spirit of the corn, walked upon the earth, and the sun so lovingly touched her dusky face with the blush of the morning, and her eyes grew soft as the gleam of the stars on dark streams. And as she walked through the fields, the corn, the Indian maize, sprang up from the earth and filled the air with its fringed tassels and whispering leaves. And with Onata walked her two sisters, the spirit of the squash and the spirit of the bean. And as they passed, squash vines and bean plants grew from the corn hills. Now one day, Onata wandered from the sun into the darkness, where she met the evil one, Hagwadeha, who grasped her by the hair and dragged her beneath the ground to his gloomy cave. And then, sending out fire-breathing monsters, he destroyed Onata's grain. And when her sisters, the spirit of the squash and the spirit of the bean, saw the flaming monsters, they were scared. They ran away in terror. And as for poor Onata, she lay trembling captive in the dark prison cave of the evil one. She mourned the loss of her cornfields and sorrowed for her runaway sisters. "O warm, bright sun," she cried, "if I may walk once more upon the earth, never again will I leave my corn." Now the little birds of the air heard her crying, and winging their way upward, they carried her vow and gave it to the sun as he wandered through the blue heavens. And though Onata feared that she would never see the light again, the sun so loved Onata that he sent out many beams to search for her. And they pierced through the dark ground and entered the prison cave, guiding her back again to her fields. Thanks to the rays of sunshine, she was able to see the daylight once more. And ever after, Onata tenderly watched her fields, and the little birds of the air flocked to her service. They followed her through the rows of corn and made war on the tiny enemies that gnawed at the roots of the grain. And at harvest time, the grateful Onata scattered the first gathered corn over the broad lands, and the little birds, fluttering and singing joyfully, partook of the feast spread for them on the meadow ground. It was the indigenous nations of Mexico that first cultivated corn 8,000 years ago, and since then it has traveled throughout the world. But that is a story for another day. We now enter into our time in our service that we make for our hearts and our spirits, for our cares and concerns for one another. We lift up and hold the joys and sorrows and cares and concerns and challenges that we each may be facing. During our time of silence this morning, I invite you to share your joys or concerns or significant milestones of your own in the comments. I invite us all to hold these cares in the compassionate embrace of this loving community. I now share with you the words of Reverend Michelle. Spirit of life, ground of our being, root of unified mystery, growing into myriad branches of expression, bring us together now. Bring us close to the earth, ear to the whispering grass, quietly, attentively, waiting with slow breaths, listening for the very stones to cry out with their rocky stories of tectonic plates, meeting and parting, meeting their mineral memories of Haitian days, molten rocks flowing and joining, their ancient legends of stars born out of the collapse of other stars. Help us to remember. Help us piece together our oneness with matter, our oneness that matters. With one more deep breath, may we rise, star-stuffed, walking and rolling across the surface of an impossible blue-green planet. May we join together to heal what is divided. May we find wholeness within, without, among, between. Eternal source, seed of the universe, help us to grow peace. So be it. Blessed be. Amen. Now let us join in singing Simple Gifts. The words will be on the screen.
Turning we come round right.
Again, good morning. Let me begin with Psalms 90, verse 12. So teach us to number our days, that we may apply our hearts to wisdom. This is my last service as a worship associate. It has been a privilege to work with the current WAs and the ministers for the last 3 years. According to a passage in Cast, The Origins of Our Discontent, Isabel Wilkerson wrote that 2040 is the year that whites will no longer be a majority in the United States. My Texan sister told me that they will reach that point by 2030. I am recounting some of this history, forwards and backwards, today, because today represents for me a kind of ending of a journey I've been on since 1970. That was when I dropped out of the doctoral program at the University of Chicago. At that time, the university's motto was the life of the mind. Following the upheaval of the 1968 Democratic Convention and the occupation of black neighborhoods in Chicago by the National Guard, the cloistered life of the mind seemed so irrelevant. After what I'd seen during 2 years of drought and famine in India in the Peace Corps, and what was happening all around me when I returned to the States in 1968, I wanted to be more completely involved. During that transition away from the university, I was fortunate to meet and over time count as friends a number of the leaders of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, the Urban League, and the Chicago Freedom Summer Coalition. So I became a community organizer of tenant unions and fighting urban renewal displacement on Chicago's South Side. And I fell into a years-long mentorship, then later partnership, with Albert Raby, a black school teacher who had been the leader of the Chicago Freedom Movement, the coalition that brought Dr. King to Chicago in 1966. And who I saw from a distance at Soldier Field that summer. Later, in 1983, I was head of a citywide housing coalition. I also was a member of a collection of organizers which focused on electing Black and Latinx leaders to become aldermen and state representatives. At that time, my mentor, Al Raby, also was managing Harold Washington's successful mayoral campaign. It was quite a time. We thought we had the Daily Machine on the run. Subsequently, I worked as an organizer of citywide coalitions and political campaigns in 4 other cities, including Oakland, Richmond, and Berkeley, for a little more than 25 years. Finally, worn out and needing a rest from the unending demands of building and funding and maintaining nonprofit groups that I led, I became a school teacher, first in Oakland and then in West County. Looking back now, there is a whole lot more of life behind me than what's left in front of me. So looking over the arc of the last 50 years, I realized that what I thought throughout that time, despite all the setbacks, was that my hope and my faith would allow me to see in my lifetime an unbroken and widening path of social progress and human dignity for all. Most likely, I will not live to 2040. Yet clearly the work is not done. Clearly my children's and grandchildren's efforts and contributions will be needed, maybe for their entire lifetimes too. Clearly, the need for all-out commitment and effort needs to carry forward in more powerful ways than ever before. Our church is a good place to base such worthy efforts of hope and faith. And I plan in 2040 to be here with you. I've already asked my children to spread some of my ashes anonymously on this site so that molecularly I will be here with you as you carry on. Thank you.
I will be reading Reverend Michelle's sermon in her absence. We've got a lot of different things around, don't we? Things in our homes, things we buy, things we get rid of, things that are meant to be around for a while and things that aren't. So what I'm wondering is how many of you have had one of these around your house at some point in time? A rubber duck. It used to be they all looked like this, but then why would anyone need more than one? To expand the market, now they came up with all sorts of sizes, all sorts of colors, and with different types of clothes on them. Seriously, rubber ducks with clothes? In one sense, it's a quintessential toy. In another sense, it's also an example of many things that are wrong with the things that we have created in the modern age. Not only do we have dyes, but there's also bromine, chromium, a bunch of lead, and a whopping amount of chlorine made into rubber ducks. And these little things off-gas for a good while, as well as leach these chemicals into the bathwater. And of course, they are chewed on by our little ones. But these aren't the worst things. There's a certain compound that has been put into things to make them more pliable for a long time and is now being seen as poisonous. Phthalates. 36% of the duck is made of this stuff. Phthalates have been linked to reproductive problems, early puberty, asthma, ADHD, obesity, autism, and male fertility issues. That's not what I want in my rubber duck. Phthalates aren't just found in rubber ducks. In one study, they were found in 50% of the toys tested. And they're also in flooring, adhesives, shampoo, and other personal care products, cosmetics, automotive plastics, and all sorts of other things. The rubber duck is a modern-day Rachel Carson warning us about the toxins and poisons that we surround ourselves with. It's part of this ongoing experiment we are conducting on ourselves. An experiment of this resource-intensive, toxin-filled, consumer-driven society that we've built and reside in. We are about to head into the holiday season, although seeing the holiday decorations have been appearing in stores for a month now, as well as Black Friday deals. We've already been there for a bit. In America, it's a season filled with traditions and gatherings, but also with expectations, desires, and a level of consumption that is unparalleled during the rest of the year. The spectacle of the day after Thanksgiving certainly comes to mind. I'm sure you've seen the videos and the pictures of the mobs descending on the stores for Black Friday deals. Have you seen the poor behavior that frenzy can bring out of us? One of the things that most worries me is how much the shopping season and the gift-giving oriented holiday season brings out a desire for things, and the fact that the desire can try to crowd out just about anything else. In an evolutionary sense, we need a desire, but we don't need it anymore. But now the desire remains, and it's an automatic desire, an appetite for things, pleasure at finding and receiving new things. We're always out on the hunt. Is this really how we want to be living? And not only that, this consumption-driven existence is wreaking havoc on our planet, especially as more and more of the world's population gains the ability to consume at higher and higher levels. Is this really what we want? Do we really want to be these consumption engines who continually take in things and then spit them back into our garbage cycle? Have we really become that materialistic? Now, before I go on, let me explain why I think this is just right to be talking about in church. As some folks might be wondering, I truly believe this is a spiritual issue, because it's this materialism and consumption-driven desire that are eroding our connections with each other and our connection with our planet. It's a spiritual issue because it gets at the heart of who we are as human beings, of who we are with each other, and of who we are with the earth. It's also about intentional living, going through our lives with awareness rather than automatic reactions. As I watch the coming tsunami of the holiday shopping season, I especially start wondering about these things. Then seeing the mountains of trash that follow the holiday season, as we know things quickly end up in the trash bin, I wonder if we ever valued these things in the first place. Author and sociologist Juliet Schor has a different way of looking about this. She wonders if, in some ways, she says, we're not materialistic enough. She goes on, we are too materialistic in our everyday sense of the word. We are not at all materialistic enough in the true sense of the word. We need to be true materialists, like really caring about the materiality of goods. What would that look like, to be true materialists and really paying attention to the materiality of goods, really caring about what they are, what they do to us, and what goes into them? Unfortunately, so many things these days aren't made for that kind of use. They're made to quickly wear out and quickly go out of style, and the fashion industry is one of the worst infractors of this. They've tried to create a sense that things go out of style so quickly that they take clothes out of the stores the moment the new style comes in, even every week. And they even slash the unsold clothes so they can't be used or resold. Electronics and software keep updating so quickly that they are essentially out of date before they are sold. This rapid cycle, as well as just the intensity of resources and energy that are used to fuel our consumptive engine, are tremendous. We are rapidly turning the earth into stuff, or the fuel that we need to move our stuff around. And then the irony is that much of this stuff, something like 80 to 90%, gets thrown out within 6 months, and very little of it gets recycled. Let's go back to the rubber duck and think about what all went into making this cute little rubber duck. First, they usually aren't rubber anymore, as natural rubber is way too expensive to use for such trivial things like toys. They are vinyl plastic with phthalates that we talked about earlier to make them more pliable. Then there are so-called non-toxic dyes that are added to them also, and perhaps paint for the eye and the beak, but with lead, chlorine, chromium, bromine, and other chemicals. It's hard to call them non-toxic. Many also have the scent of baby powder or baby bath added to them, another chemical. All of these chemicals are made from ingredients that we find in the earth and then manufacture a process that recreates byproducts and pollution. Then the chemicals are shipped to another plant where they are made into duct form, also with pollution and waste produced. Then they are shipped maybe overseas, but definitely involving a truck of some sort to a distributor warehouse. Then they are trucked to a store where we could buy them or else buy them directly online, where they're trucked to the warehouse and then the mail service brings them to us. There's pollution and oil used for each of these trucks, just to move this one little rubber duck around for however much we may actually use it before it ends up in the storage bin or in the trash bin. Oh, and let's not forget the label. Usually virgin paper with chemicals added to make it slightly glossy and also to make one side sticky, then the ink on it as well. Now that's just one little toy duck, which is quite simple in components compared to many other things. What about for some of the other stuff that surrounds us, both consumable and non-consumable? It truly boggles the mind to try to multiply it out for everything manufactured or processed that we encounter and consume in our lives. Comparatively speaking, Americans consume an extraordinarily high level compared to folks from many other countries. Some figures say that if everyone in the world consumed like the average American, we'd need something like 17 or maybe even more Earths to keep up with the demand. Even now, just adding the consumption in the world, it's something like 4 Earths that we're using up. And with increasing world population and increasing demand for things, and for so-called the ideal of Western living, that number just continues going up. Needless to say, we've only got our one Earth. How can we make this change for us as individuals? What keeps us out of this cycle of consumption? And what does opting out look like for each of us? There's a lot of things we can do to opt out of the cycle, especially during holiday season. There are traditions that have been part of our lives and of our families and of groups of friends. And there are expectations to do certain things, both expectations that others have of us and expectations that we have for ourselves. There's the innate desire for things and the innate need to hunt for the things to make our lives better or easier. And possibly the most tenacious of what's holding us, that's the rush of happiness that acquiring brand new things brings, literally a release of dopamine into our brains. There are a lot of things that keep us in the consumption cycle, things that hold us there and make it hard for us to even see them for what they are. What does it look like to opt out? What does it look like to opt out of the seemingly automatic cycle that we've been in for most of our lives, that surrounds us nearly everywhere we look? What does it look like to choose to do something different? Ultimately, what I hope for all of us is that we are able to shift to living in a place of awareness and sustainability. And if you're already in that place, to take another step further in that direction, in the direction of living and consuming intentionally. Some consumption is necessary for everyday life. We have to eat, We need water and shelter, and as such, some consumption of other stuff isn't a bad thing either. The problem is mindless consumption and overconsumption. What is your next step? What could be your next step this holiday season or another time of the year that is particularly hard for you? Aside from intentionality, it comes down to redefining happiness. Depending on happiness to be triggered and fueled by things and acquiring things isn't a healthy happiness or even a real form of happiness at all. Despite the fact that our brains are chemically think it is. That doesn't make for a happy life. To be dependent on things for our happiness, chasing happiness and chasing joy go deeper than that. We're headed into Thanksgiving week, a holiday tradition that is often associated with family and friends and gathering over a meal. This Wednesday is the most traveled day of the year in this country, the single most traveled day. That's a lot of folks going to gather with those that they care about. Of course, the irony is that the day after Thanksgiving, or really now Thanksgiving afternoon or evening, ends up being the exact opposite of that when the buying frenzy starts. What would it take to opt out of the frenzy and hold on to the people and the gratitude and the joy of being together? What does it take to opt out of the consumption cycle and not even to think about the rubber ducks that you think you need or that you think someone else needs? Our lives, our spirits, and our planet desperately need us to figure this out. They need us to find another way and to keep going further and to stop from going further and further down one way and into this new way. What's one thing that we can do? Well, come this Friday, maybe you can try for a start, don't buy nuthin', and come join the UUCB tradition as we will be hosting Free Friday here on campus. And I hope you have a truly blessed Thanksgiving holiday and safe and healthy travels if you are traveling. Blessed be.
Now is the time in our service when we bring our offerings forward. And I'll find the page that'll explain some more about that in a second here. As we commit together to making this a loving community, we take time to remember that UUCB needs our gifts and support. We invite you now to make an offering. Each week, half our offerings are shared with a good neighbor organization who needs our financial support. And we hope you will continue to practice generosity with them during these difficult times. This month, our good neighbor is the Segura Te Land Trust. Segura Te Land Trust is an urban, intertribal, woman-led trust that facilitates the return of indigenous land to indigenous people. Offerings of any value are received with gratitude. Details on how to give electronically will appear on your screen as our offertory begins. Thank you.
Our changed my life. No, 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 you can't take that away from me. No, they can't take that away from me.
Please join me in dedicating our offering. We dedicate our offering and ourselves to the mission of this congregation, to create loving community, inspire spiritual growth, and encourage lives of integrity, joy, and service. Thank you.
It's been good to be together today, even virtually. Before we shift to our coffee hour on Zoom, may I remind you to check out all the things that are available in our congregation, even during the pandemic. Explore our website at uucb.org. There you could find a link in News to The Week Ahead, our weekly email newsletter, which includes a list of activities, announcements, and contact information. And as we prepare to leave the worship service, here are a few things to note. Katya's recital is today at 2 p.m. And don't forget, Free Friday is this Friday. Now please join in singing our closing hymn, number 1064, Blue Boat Home.
Leaning over the
Reverend Michelle's words resonated very deeply for me. When I was preparing my move from the East to the West Coast, I went through that process of deciding what was important and what was not, and going through all my junk, throwing some stuff out. I gave a lot of stuff away. I shipped some, I sold some, and it was a reminder that everything is impermanent. Reverend Michelle's sermon is a reminder to let go of all we carry. Let go of our burdens, our fears, our worries and sorrows. Let go of attachments to old ideas and how we think things should be. Let go of things that no longer serve us. Feel free to let go, so that in letting go, we can be free. Blessed be.